A young nurse lost her job after saving the life of a 10-year-old girl who had been hit by a stray bullet. The next day, she received a shocking invitation from the president. Late that rainy evening, a young nurse named Matilda was wrapping up her shift at the city hospital in Texas. The hallways, once bustling with activity, had fallen quiet under the blanket of night. Outside, rain pelted the windows and thunder rumbled across the sky like an approaching stampede. She had just signed her last patient chart and was preparing to head home when the silence shattered. The emergency room doors burst open, shouts filled the air, and footsteps pounded. The calm of the night was immediately swallowed by panic. Matilda turned instinctively, already moving before her brain fully caught up. Paramedics stormed through the doors, pushing a gurney with a tiny figure strapped to it. A 10-year-old girl, no older than Matilda's niece, lay motionless. Her small frame was soaked in blood, her breathing shallow and almost imperceptible. Gunshot wound to the chest. No pulse. One of the paramedics barked as they rolled her toward the trauma bay. Matilda's heart dropped. The trauma team hadn't arrived. There had been a major pileup on the interstate, and every available surgeon was stuck in traffic or rerouted. Matilda glanced around. The ER was understaffed, just a few nurses, one general physician, and a tech team who looked as terrified as they were unprepared. Her fingers twitched at her sides. She knew every step of what needed to be done, but she wasn't authorized. Protocol was clear. No nurse, no matter how experienced, was permitted to perform invasive surgery. But protocol hadn't seen a little girl bleeding out in front of her. Matilda stepped forward, her voice cutting through the chaos. Prep her now. I need a thoracotomy tray. Stat! A stunned silence followed. One of the newer nurses blinked at her. Matilda, you can't. She'll die in 5 minutes if we wait. Matilda snapped, her voice sharp but steady. Get the tray. The girl's name was Ava. A teacher's aide had found her collapsed near a school playground, the victim of a stray bullet from a nearby robbery. The bullet had torn through her chest, missing her heart by millimeters but collapsing her lung and severing an artery. Her vitals were crashing. Her skin was pale, lips tinged with blue. There was no more time. Matilda washed her hands in record time and slipped on gloves. Her brain locked into years of training as a nurse. She wasn't allowed to lead surgeries, but she had assisted in dozens. She'd watched, learned, and prepared for the worst, even when others hadn't. With tools in hand and a shaky assistant beside her, she made the incision. The room faded away. All she could hear was her own breathing and the rhythmic beeping of the monitor. Her fingers worked methodically, isolating the damage, applying pressure, stitching vessels. She didn't stop until the bleeding did. After what felt like a lifetime, the girl let out a soft gasp, then another. Her chest began to rise, slow, uneven, but alive. The ER erupted into motion again as backup arrived, too late to do more than take over and stabilize what Matilda had already done. She stepped back, shaking, covered in blood. Her legs threatened to give out, but she held firm. The girl had survived. Matilda expected chaos. Instead, the room stood in stunned silence for a moment. Everyone seemed unsure whether to applaud or reprimand her. She didn't care. She had done what had to be done. But the calm didn't last long. The next morning, Matilda was called into the boardroom. The hospital administrator, a stiff gray-haired man with glasses too large for his narrow face, sat at the head of the table. HR representatives flanked him like statues. They asked her to recount the events. She did so without embellishment or apology. There was a long pause. Then the words came. You violated strict medical protocol. You are hereby terminated effective immediately. Matilda didn't cry. She simply stood, handed over her badge, and walked out of the only job she had ever loved. It wasn't until she got home, still wearing the same shoes she'd worn during the operation, that the reality hit her. She'd saved a child, and for that, she had lost everything. The fluorescent lights buzzed softly above, casting a sterile white glow over the quiet recovery room. Machines blinked with a dull rhythm. The only sounds were a gentle mechanical hum and the faint steady beeping of a heart monitor. In the center of the room, beneath crisp hospital sheets and surrounded by cold metal rails, lay a girl far too small for the bed she occupied. Her name was Ava Lennox, 10 years old. The bullet had torn through her chest like a thief in the night, stealing her breath, her pulse, nearly her life. Now, she lay motionless, her pale face turned toward the window where weak morning light crept through half-drawn blinds. At her bedside sat a man dressed in quiet power, a custom-tailored charcoal suit, silver cufflinks, shoes that hadn't touched dirt in years. But he looked nothing like a man of privilege in that moment. His jacket was off, sleeves rolled, hair ruffled. One hand gripped his daughter's tiny fingers while the other rested on his forehead, as if trying to press the weight of the last 12 hours out of his skull. This was Charles Lennox, billionaire tech entrepreneur, media-shy philanthropist, and the father of the girl in the bed. He hadn't left her side since he'd been called to the hospital late the night before. When he arrived, his daughter had already been through emergency surgery. The staff told him she'd been minutes, seconds, from dying. A nurse had made a judgment call. There hadn't been time to wait for the trauma team, who were stuck in a pile-up outside the city. The child had no pulse. The nurse had taken over, operated, and saved Ava's life. Now, hours later, Charles still hadn't been able to speak to that nurse. No one had seen her. Her name, Matilda Grace, had been mentioned once, almost in passing, by a nervous physician. But when Charles asked to speak to her, he was told she had been let go, that morning. Fired. The absurdity of it hadn't hit him at first. He was still too numb from seeing Ava in that hospital bed. But the longer the silence dragged on, the more it festered inside him, twisting into something sharp and cold. There was a knock at the door. Charles didn't look up. A nurse stepped in, young, probably in her 20s, her scrub slightly wrinkled, hands clutching a tablet to her chest like a shield. "Mr. Lennox," she said softly. He slowly turned his head. "I just wanted to say I'm glad your daughter is okay. We were all terrified when she came in last night." His eyes searched hers. "Did you work the night shift?" The nurse nodded.
"Did you see her?"
"Who?" "Matilda Grace." The nurse hesitated, then stepped inside the room and shut the door behind her. "I did." Charles straightened slightly. "Tell me what happened." She looked down at her tablet, then back up. "We got the alert about the incoming trauma. A child with a gunshot wound. The ER was chaos. Everyone was scrambling. The trauma surgeons were delayed. Matilda, she didn't wait. She looked at the girl, and I swear, sir, it was like something flipped inside her. She just knew there was no time. She grabbed the tray, gave orders like a seasoned surgeon, and started the procedure herself." Charles stared. "She wasn't reckless," the nurse added quickly. "She was calm, focused. Every step she took was calculated. I've never seen anything like it. We were all just standing there waiting for permission to act. But she did it. She saved that little girl's life. And they fired her for it." The nurse looked down. "Hospital policy says no nurse can perform invasive trauma surgery without clearance, especially not alone. But no one else was there. She knew she'd be punished," the nurse said softly. "She did it anyway." Charles rose slowly from his chair. He walked to the far end of the room, hands on his hips, staring at the tiled floor. He was silent for a long moment. Then he turned, eyes blazing. "What kind of place punishes someone for doing the right thing?" The nurse didn't respond. He stepped closer. "Do you know where she is?" The girl hesitated, then shook her head. "She left before sunrise. She didn't say much, just packed her locker and disappeared. I think she knew what was coming." Charles exhaled through his nose, the sound low and dangerous. "If you hear from her, tell her I'm looking for her." The nurse nodded once, wide-eyed, then slipped out of the room. Charles turned back to Ava. She looked so small, so breakable. He sat again, lowering himself carefully into the chair beside her bed. His fingers brushed a lock of hair away from her forehead. He thought about the last time they'd argued about ballet shoes. She wanted pink satin. He said white was more practical. They hadn't spoken for hours afterward. Now all he wanted was for her to open her eyes. He reached for the sketch pad the nurse had placed at the foot of the bed. It had been found in Ava's backpack, stained. The story struck a chord in the hearts of millions, highlighting the ongoing conflict between cold bureaucratic rules and the urgent, unpredictable realities of medical emergencies. Within hours, hashtags like #JusticeForMatilda and #Nurses surged across Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Posts celebrating her courage and condemning the hospital's decision flooded timelines. Stories from countless healthcare workers emerged, sharing their own moments of difficult choices, risks taken, and sometimes harsh repercussions. The public was captivated not only by Matilda's story but also by the larger conversation it ignited about the humanity that too often clashes with rigid systems. Major news outlets wasted no time. Breaking news banners flashed across television screens, and the headlines dominated front pages and online news portals. "Nurse fired for saving girl's life sparks national outcry." Morning shows invited experts and advocates to debate the ethics of hospital policies, while investigative journalists dug into the hospital's decision, exposing cracks in a system that prioritizes rules over people. Yet amidst the swirling media storm, the focus always returned to Matilda herself, a quiet, determined figure thrust unwillingly into the spotlight. Matilda found herself caught in a whirlwind of interviews and public appearances. Despite her sudden fame, she remained remarkably humble, always shifting the spotlight back to the patient, the girl whose life hung in the balance that rainy night. At a televised interview, sitting beside Ava, whose recovery was steady but cautious, Matilda's voice carried a calm strength that resonated deeply. "I wasn't thinking about rules," she said softly, her eyes steady. "I was thinking about saving a life. Every second counts in situations like that. If we wait for permission, sometimes it's already too late." Her words became a rallying cry for countless healthcare workers who had wrestled with similar dilemmas. Letters poured into her mailbox and inbox, each telling stories of courage, sacrifice, and often punishment. Nurses in rural clinics, urban hospitals, and emergency rooms shared their own battles against red tape that hindered their ability to save lives. Patients and families sent notes of gratitude and sorrow, recounting moments when swift, sometimes unauthorized actions made the difference between life and death. One letter, written in shaky handwriting from a nurse in a small town in Texas, described how she had been disciplined for administering medication without prior approval because her patient's condition was rapidly deteriorating. Another, from a mother in Chicago, recounted the heartbreaking loss of a son due to delays in treatment caused by bureaucratic hurdles. Each letter reaffirmed the importance of Matilda's stand and fueled her resolve to push for change. Recognizing the power and responsibility of her newfound platform, Matilda resolved to do more than simply tell her story. With generous financial support from Ava's father, Charles Lennox, she established the Grace Foundation for Medical Courage. The foundation's mission was clear: to protect and empower healthcare professionals who, like Matilda, face retaliation for putting patients first. The foundation aimed to offer legal support, create educational programs on ethical decision-making in emergencies, and provide scholarships for nurses specializing in trauma care. Building the foundation became Matilda's new purpose. Long hours were spent meeting with legal experts, hospital administrators, and patient advocates, crafting a network designed to uplift the voices of those often silenced by fear and institutional resistance. The foundation's launch was met with widespread acclaim, receiving prominent media coverage that further amplified its mission. Despite her rising fame, Matilda remained grounded. She used every interview and speech to emphasize that her story was not about glorification but a call to reform. "This isn't just about me," she told a packed auditorium at a national nursing conference, her voice steady and passionate. "It's about creating an environment where healthcare workers are supported, not punished, when they do what's right in the moment. We owe it to our patients and to ourselves to fight for this change." Her words sparked action. Hospitals across the country began reassessing their emergency protocols, many pledging to develop clearer guidelines empowering nurses and doctors to act decisively when lives are at stake. Legislators took note, with proposals emerging to legally protect healthcare workers acting in good faith during crises. The public, inspired by Matilda's courage, rallied behind these efforts, making her a beacon of hope for change in a complex system. Throughout it all, Matilda's image transformed, from that of a fired nurse to a national symbol of bravery and integrity. She appeared on morning shows, was featured in magazines, and spoke at conferences, always with Ava by her side. Their bond, forged in crisis, was a powerful reminder of why Matilda had risked everything. The story of a nurse and a little girl became a symbol of resilience, compassion, and the profound impact one person's courage can have. Yet behind the scenes, Matilda never lost sight of the countless healthcare workers still struggling in silence. She traveled extensively, visiting hospitals and clinics, meeting nurses and doctors, hearing their stories firsthand. Every encounter strengthened her commitment to the foundation and its mission. The Grace Foundation expanded, launching training programs on ethical decision-making and emergency response, ensuring that no healthcare worker would have to face impossible choices alone. Letters continued to arrive, some hopeful, others heart-wrenching. A young nurse in Ohio thanked Matilda for giving her the courage to speak out after being threatened for bypassing protocol to save a newborn. An emergency room doctor in California shared how he implemented new policies inspired by Matilda's story to protect his team. Each message was a testament to the rippling effect of her actions. Public adoration followed, but Matilda kept her focus unwaveringly on the work ahead. She understood that fame was fleeting, but the fight for justice and compassion in healthcare was ongoing. The money she received was carefully invested, not in luxury but in tools, programs, and support systems to empower those on the front lines. Behind every public appearance was a woman grappling with profound change. From a quiet nurse committed to her patients, she had become a household name, a catalyst for change, and a source of hope. Her journey was far from over, but the path she now walked was illuminated by the lives she had touched and the movement she had inspired. Matilda's story was no longer just about a nurse who lost her job. It was about a nation waking up to the need for compassion in its hospitals, about healthcare workers finally having a voice, and about the enduring power of a single act of courage. As the days turned to weeks, and weeks to months, her resolve only grew stronger. There were still battles to fight, policies to change, and lives to save. But with every step, Matilda knew she was not alone. Her fight was now a shared one, a collective movement fueled by compassion, bravery, and an unyielding belief that doing the right thing should never come at the cost of justice. For Matilda, that belief was a light guiding her forward into an uncertain but hopeful future.